Let me tell you a story that almost every human being has lived through, but very few ever put into words. It is the story of the excluded child. Imagine a small figure on a playground, watching from the sidelines while others laugh, run, and share secrets. Their hands fidget, their heart races. They wonder what invisible wall separates them from the group. At first, it feels like a small sting, like a moment that will pass, but the longer it lasts, the deeper it carves into memory. If you have ever felt like that child, even if only once, you already know how heavy silence can feel when it is loaded with rejection. And if you've never been that child, chances are, at some point in life, you've carried the echo of their loneliness in another form. Exclusion doesn't just happen on playgrounds. It happens in classrooms, in families, in workplaces, in society itself. And the psychology behind it is far more powerful than most people realize. Here's the strange truth. Human beings are wired for belonging in the same way we are wired for food, water, and shelter. Neuroscientists studying the brain have discovered that social rejection activates the same areas as physical pain. That's why a cruel laugh or a whispered secret can feel like a bruise you can't see. For a child still learning what the world means, these experiences cut even deeper. They're not just moments, they become mirrors. Mirrors that silently whisper, "You don't belong. You're not enough." The excluded child doesn't simply miss out on a game. They carry the weight of invisibility, and invisibility over time rewires how a person sees themselves. But why does it hurt so much? To answer that, we need to step back in time, not just to childhood, but to human history. For most of our evolution, belonging wasn't optional. It was survival. A human alone in the wilderness was vulnerable. Connection meant protection. It meant food shared, threats detected, shelter built together. So our nervous system developed a powerful alarm system. Exclusion equals danger. Even today, when our physical survival may not depend on a tribe, our mind and body still react as if it does. That's why the excluded child doesn't just feel sad. They feel threatened on a level deeper than language. Their body floods with stress hormones. Their brain sharpens to notice every detail of rejection, every glance, every laugh not shared. And slowly, a pattern forms. The child begins to predict exclusion before it even happens. They hesitate to speak up, they hang back, they edit themselves. They carry the belief, if I stay quiet, maybe I won't be pushed away again. Now think about how this plays out as they grow. The classroom becomes the workplace, the playground becomes society, and unless something interrupts the cycle, the invisible wall stays with them. They may achieve success, they may surround themselves with people, but deep down, that excluded child still whispers, what if they leave? What if I don't belong? And the irony is, this very fear of exclusion can create behaviors that make connection harder. They may become overly cautious, or cling too tightly, or hide too much. The pain of exclusion becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's where it gets even more fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time. Exclusion doesn't just shape the excluded, it shapes the excluders too. Children learn very early who holds power in a group. Sometimes exclusion is not even conscious cruelty. It's a way of testing belonging, of reinforcing boundaries, of saying, we're us and you're not. Psychologists call this in-group and out-group behavior, and it shows up everywhere, from childhood games to global politics. We crave belonging so much that sometimes we exclude others just to strengthen our own place. And while the child left out is wounded, the children doing the excluding are also learning lessons about power, about empathy, about identity. These small moments ripple outward, affecting not just one person's story, but entire cultures. What makes this especially powerful is how exclusion shapes identity. Imagine a child consistently left out of games. Over time, they may conclude not that others are unkind, but that they themselves are unworthy. This is the dangerous twist of the human mind. We personalize exclusion. Instead of saying, they excluded me, the child says, I am the kind of person who is not worth including. This belief can harden into self-concept, and self-concept guides every choice. Decades later, that same person might hesitate to apply for a job, or enter a relationship, or share their art, not because they aren't capable, but because deep down they believe they are the outsider. One childhood playground becomes a lifetime of hesitation. And yet, here is the paradox. Many of the world's most creative, insightful, and compassionate people were once excluded children. Why? Because exclusion gives a person a unique vantage point. When you're on the outside looking in, you notice things that others miss. You see patterns. You observe dynamics. You develop empathy for others who are overlooked. Pain, when transformed, becomes perception. This doesn't mean exclusion is good. It leaves scars, no question. But sometimes those scars turn into maps that guide a person to see humanity more deeply. Some of the greatest works of literature, philosophy, and art come from voices that once felt outside the circle. The excluded child, if they find healing, often becomes the adult who gives voice to the silenced. But healing does not happen by accident. It requires awareness, both personal and collective. On a personal level, it means learning to separate your identity from your experience. You were excluded, but you are not exclusion itself. You felt invisible, but you are not invisibility. On a collective level, it means recognizing the subtle ways we still build invisible walls. Who gets invited into conversations? Whose voices are amplified? Who gets overlooked not out of malice but out of habit? Every culture, every classroom, every workplace carries these dynamics, and the cost of ignoring them is high, not just for the individuals excluded, but for the richness of what we all could be if no voice were left unheard. There's another layer to this that many overlook. Children don't just learn about exclusion from their peers, they learn it from adults too. A teacher who unconsciously favors outspoken students can reinforce the silence of quieter ones. A parent distracted by their own struggles can leave a child feeling unseen. Even well-meaning families sometimes overlook the emotional needs of a child who doesn't fit the expected mold. And when children sense this kind of exclusion at home, the wound cuts even deeper, because home is supposed to be the one place where belonging is unconditional. Studies in developmental psychology have shown that children who consistently feel emotionally excluded, even subtly, are more likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, and difficulty forming trust in adulthood. It's not about one moment, but about patterns. The human brain, especially in childhood, is a pattern detecting machine. And if the pattern it sees is, "I don't belong," that belief can echo for years. Yet, as painful as this is, here's the hope. The brain is not fixed. Our sense of identity is not cemented. Neuroscience shows us that with new experiences, new relationships, new forms of self-understanding, we can literally rewire the patterns. The excluded child within us can learn new lessons. They can learn that exclusion was never proof of unworthiness. It was proof only of the fragility of human groups, of the limits of others' awareness, of the universal struggle we all have in trying to belong. In fact, realizing that nearly everyone, at some point, has felt like the excluded child can itself be healing. Because suddenly the wall is not between you and everyone else. The wall is an illusion, built from moments of fear, but it does not define the whole of life. So let me ask you this. If nearly every human being has felt excluded, what would change if we all remembered that truth in our daily interactions? What if, instead of unconsciously repeating patterns of exclusion, we became conscious builders of inclusion? What if every time you noticed someone on the margins, you asked yourself, what small act could make them feel seen today? Sometimes it's as simple as eye contact, a smile, a genuine question. To the group, it may seem like nothing. To the excluded child, it can feel like sunlight breaking through a storm. This is not just theory. Research on belonging shows that even small gestures can dramatically change outcomes. One study found that when teachers wrote encouraging notes on student essays, students not only improved academically, but reported feeling more connected and confident. Another study showed that workplaces with cultures of inclusion had higher creativity, stronger performance, and lower turnover. Inclusion is not just kindness, it is power. It is the unlocking of human potential. And every excluded child who is welcomed back in doesn't just heal, they bring back with them a depth of insight the group might never have found on its own. But there's another reason the story of the excluded child matters so much. It's not only about what happens in childhood, but also about what those early wounds teach us about the very nature of being human. To feel excluded is, in many ways, to encounter the most primal fear of existence, the fear of being alone in a world that feels too vast, too indifferent, and yet, paradoxically, this same experience teaches us about the deepest longing we all share, the longing to be seen, understood, and accepted for who we are. The excluded child is not just a figure on a playground. The excluded child is a mirror of the human condition. Think about it. Every culture, every philosophy, every religion at its core wrestles with this question. Where do I belong? Who am I in relation to others? The pain of exclusion reminds us of how fragile our sense of self can be, but also how resilient we can become when we seek belonging, not just from others, but from within. This is one of the most powerful shifts a person can make, the realization that belonging is not only something given by a group, but something we can cultivate inside ourselves. For the excluded child who grows into adulthood, healing often begins when they recognize that the absence of belonging outside does not mean the absence of worth inside. Still, that is easier said than done, because exclusion leaves echoes. It shows up in the way you hesitate before speaking in a group, the way you second-guess whether your story matters, the way you sometimes shrink your dreams before anyone else has the chance to reject them. These echoes can be subtle, but they are real. And yet, here is where psychology offers a path forward. Studies show that when people reframe their past experiences, not as personal failures but as universal human struggles, they begin to loosen the grip of those old wounds. Instead of saying, "I was excluded because I wasn't enough," the narrative shifts to, "I was excluded because every group, every human, struggles with fear and boundaries." This reframing doesn't erase the pain, but it changes the meaning. And meaning, in the end, is what allows wounds to become wisdom. There's a beautiful concept in developmental psychology known as post-traumatic growth. It describes how people, after experiencing hardship, can actually develop greater empathy, deeper resilience, and a stronger sense of purpose. The excluded child, if given the chance to heal, often becomes the adult who notices the lonely coworker, who listens when no one else is listening, who creates spaces of welcome that they themselves once longed for. In this way, the pain of exclusion can ripple outward into acts of compassion that change lives. It's as if the wound, once acknowledged, becomes a doorway, not just back into belonging, but into creating belonging for others. And yet, we should not romanticize exclusion. It is painful, it is damaging, it is something no child should have to carry. The reason it matters to understand this psychology is not to say that exclusion is somehow good, but to recognize how powerful our role can be in either perpetuating it or interrupting it. Every day, we stand at a crossroads. With our words, our attention, our awareness, we either reinforce the invisible walls or we begin to dismantle them. We either teach children, through our silence, that exclusion is normal, or we teach them, through our compassion, that every voice deserves a place at the table. And make no mistake, the stakes are high. Excluded children are more likely to withdraw academically, to disengage socially, to develop anxiety about participation. Over time, these patterns can cascade into adulthood, affecting relationships, careers, even health. Loneliness, after all, is not just an emotion, it is a biological stressor. Research has shown that chronic loneliness can weaken the immune system, increase inflammation, and shorten life expectancy. This means that the playground moment of exclusion is not a small thing. It is the seed of outcomes that reach far into the future. When we understand that, the way we treat each other in small moments begins to look far more significant. But let us pause here and consider the other side. If exclusion can shape a life in painful ways, then inclusion can shape it in healing ways. A single moment of welcome, a single gesture of recognition can redirect a child's story. A teacher who notices the quiet student, a peer who invites the overlooked kid into the game, a parent who affirms the uniqueness of their child instead of comparing them to others. These moments may seem small, but psychologically, they are enormous. They tell the child, "You belong here. You are part of us. Your presence matters." And when a child internalizes that message, their entire world shifts. The invisible wall begins to dissolve. The truth is, we all have the power to be that person. For children, for friends, for strangers, even for ourselves. To remember what it felt like to be excluded is to hold a map that guides us toward creating connection. Every time you choose to listen when it would be easier to ignore, every time you open a space for someone who is left out, you are not just changing a moment, you are changing a pattern. And when patterns change, lives change. Now let's take this deeper. What does it mean on a philosophical level to live in a world where exclusion is so common? Some thinkers suggest that exclusion is inevitable, that any time humans form a group, boundaries will be drawn and someone will be left out. There may be truth in that, but inevitability is not the same as destiny. We may not be able to erase exclusion completely, but we can transform how we respond to it. We can choose to recognize that exclusion reveals more about the fragility of groups than it does about the worth of individuals. And in recognizing that, we can begin to live differently, not chasing belonging as proof of value, but offering belonging as an act of humanity. The excluded child then becomes a teacher of empathy, a teacher of resilience, a teacher of what it means to carry pain and still choose love. Many of us still carry that child inside us, and maybe, just maybe, the most profound act of healing is to turn to that inner child and say the words they always needed to hear. You belong. You always belonged. Even when others couldn't see it, your worth was never missing. Saying those words, even silently, can shift the entire trajectory of a life. Because belonging at its deepest level is not about fitting into a circle drawn by others. It is about realizing that the circle was never closed in the first place. We are already part of something larger, something infinite, something human. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a challenge, to notice the excluded child, both in the world around us and in ourselves. To ask, where are the invisible walls I am maintaining, consciously or unconsciously? Who around me feels unseen, unheard, uninvited? And what small act could I offer today to remind them of their place in the human story? These are not abstract questions, they are practical. Because in every classroom, every family, every workplace, there is someone right now feeling the ache of exclusion. And your awareness, your gesture, your invitation might be the turning point in their story. And here is the final thought. The excluded child is not a symbol of weakness, but of truth. They remind us that every human being carries the same longing, to be part of something, to matter, to be seen. When we remember that, when we honor that, we begin to build a different kind of world. A world where belonging is not a prize to be earned, but a gift to be shared. A world where no one has to stand on the sidelines, wondering what invisible wall keeps them out. A world where the words we offer, the spaces we create, the compassion we extend, quietly but powerfully rewrite the story. So the next time you see someone standing alone or feel yourself retreating into silence, remember this. The story of the excluded child does not have to end in exclusion. It can end in recognition. It can end in connection. It can end in the simple, radical act of saying, "You belong." And perhaps in saying it to others, we finally learn to believe it ourselves.